Three, two, one. Let's go! Skip-o!
Motherfucking P-Dog.
We back.
Dude, Robin's back with a new look.
Robin is back.
Freshly shaved.
Man. Dude, you look like you're like 20 right now.
Thanks, man.
Dude.
Appreciate that.
Or like, you know, like super questionably young. You just like, you look like that guy that hit puberty just a little early.
Dude, I'm obliged.
What happened, man?
It's the West Texas heat, man. Just couldn't handle it.
Too much.
Yeah.
Your face was burning up.
Dude.
It's too hot.
As you're running those rock physics modules. Cool, man.
Every day.
Every day. Dude.
So, we're back.
Yeah,
we're physically back after one gnarly drive.
Yes.
One gnarly 12, possibly 13-hour drive.
With the whole family.
Dude.
How was
With
that?
studio engineer, little mama,
It was
big mama.
It was great.
Great.
It was smooth sailing, dog.
Skippo definitely got a strong education in his future as carrying around babies.
Yeah, no 12-hour road trips.
With the fam.
Yeah, with the whole fam bam.
The whole fam bam.
She killed it on the way up.
She killed it on the way up. Yeah, solid.
Caught
solid.
a fever on the way back, and that was kind of sketchy. Something in Denver. Maybe it was the homeless, because that was a thing at Urtech.
That was a
Dude.
shocker for me.
Dude.
There's a lot of
What?
homeless people.
Is going on, and they're not just like simply homeless, like chilling, playing the guitar, and like, hey,
Yeah.
can I have some money?
Well, we were kind of talking about that, right? Like
Yeah.
in LA, there's like a split. It sounds terrible to say, but when you see a homeless person, they're typically, you know, more elderly,
Yep.
you know, possibly, you know, a vet or someone
Yep.
with some sort of like mental disorder,
Right, physical for sure.
disorder. But dude, they were like young homeless people,
Dude,
and they
and-
were rowdy.
Right. That's what was upsetting with the whole situation. And the locals are like, yeah, you know, the rules are that we just kind of let them go. You don't shoo them away. You don't have the police that kind of mess with that situation where you have in other states and other cities. So and there's the byproduct of that, right? And letting those dudes like not sure what they're on, but majority of them were very aggressive.
Oh, super
right?
aggressive.
If you get the wrong personality down that street at that time, there was a brawl breaking out without question.
Yeah.
Because these dudes were shirt off, chesty, and all like mad looking.
Yeah,
and
who knows what
looking
they're
at
on.
you. You're going like, and they'll say something about anything. Your hat,
Yeah.
backwards hat, okay. And you're like, what?
Oh, guy with the shirt all buttoned up and your hat. Yeah, that's
Dude.
so
Deal.
big guy over here. And you're
you
just
gotta
like,
be
dude.
kidding me.
It's like, hey, man, I just got lunch. Just
And
trying to get
it's
back
all
to the
like
conference
lit.
center.
It's nice, but it smelled like a garbage can.
Yeah.
I thought downtown Denver sucked. Straight up. Why not say it how I feel?
Yeah. Downtown Denver may have sucked.
Yeah.
But
oh man,
go a little further west.
Let's go, dude. We got to see the Garden of the Gods.
Garden of the
man.
Gods.
Dude, you got to see
Evergreen.
the Red Rock Amphitheater.
Dude, Red Rock Amphitheater, which
Yeah.
was crazy. That was, dude, that greatest
about it.
acoustics in any venue I've ever been in, without a
so
doubt.
amazing.
Dude. The
Wow.
band, so
Just
the
surrounded by rocks.
The story goes is, you know, it was a last minute decision. A very good friend of ours, geophysicist,
Yep.
Dr. Bill.
Yep.
He suggested, hey, you're in Denver, go to Red Rocks. Doesn't matter who's playing.
Yep.
So we, P to the dog and myself, we end up going
Dream
to Red Rock and seeing the string cheese incident live.
Well, granted, we only saw like 2 songs by them.
Yeah,
but
and then that's
was
a story
amazing.
in itself. Yeah, the intro song was 20 minutes long. So it was
Dude.
crowd was super gnarly,
Yeah.
super crazy. Acoustics were awesome, but then it just started dumping.
pouring, dude.
And,
the storm hit.
Yeah. At first it was like doable. It was like a sprinkle, and then it was like thunder, lightning, and you're just like drenched, and you're like, I'm miserable.
You guys are out of control. And then we do shows. Monday started up.
Dude.
Tuesday was live. We got a bunch of shows coming out
It
from
was
Urtech.
in an iconic booth, man. An
It was.
iconic booth.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Yes, it was. I thought it was a great event, man. I think the majority of the conversations I had off the mic, right, and just in general, was another year of Urtech, of just a bunch of just papers everywhere, presentations everywhere. You're overwhelmed.
It's the classic too much.
Yeah.
But that's the thing too. It's like quantity doesn't mean quality.
Right. And
'Cause-
there's a paradigm shift, I think, happening, because a few years ago, I would even say 5 to 10 years ago, Urtech, that much going on. How exciting, right? You
Oh
have
my
so many
God.
people talking about all these different things. Now I feel like the industry's going, well, most of this is kind of bullshit,
Yeah.
right? What are you actually showing? What are you actually talking about?
Here's the thing. I feel like 5 years ago, there was this kind of shroud around unconventionals, right? And
Right.
Urtech was starting to like move that, like try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now we understand, that's bull.
Yeah.
That's bull. Like I'm looking at this paper, it's like it's cool stuff.
Right.
Data's cool, but
Yeah, exactly.
your
Maybe you're
interpretation,
collecting data.
yeah, but your interpretation is bull.
Right.
Right.
Right. And yeah, and with that being said and holding that as a point, I think the major point of these conventions is when you go and you collaborate and you start breaking into new conversations with
100%.
new people and you start talking about what you're doing and what you think is important. Are your interpretations matching up with that person in that conversation? And an hour or two later at the happy hour, you're actually talking about something that has an effect on maybe your interpretation, or maybe with something you're going to bring back to the office and say, this is a way we can get better. We can get more efficient in drilling. We can get more efficient in completions, or whatever it is. Those are the conversations that everybody's going to Urtech for, whatever convention it is. Right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, the most thought-provoking stuff that happened at the conference were just, you're walking down, one of the aisles in the exhibit hall, and you're like, oh, hey, man, what's going on? And it's like, what you working on? And then all of a sudden, an hour later, you're like, all right,
Yeah,
cool. I'm gonna absorb that. I'm gonna walk this off.
Yeah. We got a bottle of Tito's at the table, not the
Tito's.
proper 12.
Proper 12 is now gone.
Yeah, Conor McGregor calling you out.
We're pushing hard. We're pushing hard. I mean, at this point, the Dawson show
That's
with
right.
Mr. Jumper will be out.
Yep.
And it'll explain why Tito's needs to be the PBE sponsor. Just saying.
Mr. Tito's, we know you are
Mr.
Tito's.
we know you're a geophysicist at heart, and we know that you're a huge fan of this show. So please contact us. We want to drink your Tito's for the rest of the show. We are a fan of the Tito's. If everybody knows the Tittlemeyer House, the house special is built the foundation of Tito's. Like, I'm keeping you in business with my alcoholism.
That's a lie. We're somewhat sober.
There's barely anything. This is actually water
Yeah.
for liability issues.
You want to talk about the show? This
Yeah,
episode?
man.
Yeah.
Aaron Close, dude. Big data.
Big data.
Machine
Big
learning.
hype.
It was pretty crazy to have Aaron on because
Yeah.
I mean, his background in general, right?
Right.
I mean, he went to Colorado School of Mines. He got 3 degrees?
Yep.
Was mathematics,
computer
science, and geophysics,
Geophysics.
or just geophysical engineering.
That's right. Geophysical engineering. That's right.
Dude, over 23 credit hours a semester,
Averaged.
something ungodly like that. How he goes out, works at Marathon, with our friend of the show as well, Denise Cox,
Yep.
and she just drops a paper,
Yeah, here's
just
the
a pile
Permian
of paper.
Basin.
Yeah, have fun with that. See you tomorrow. And then just kind of crossing paths with a mentor of all of ours, DT,
Yeah.
Right.
Tom Brown, and the lessons that Dave instilled in him then to what he carries on today.
Still has it in him
Still
today.
has it today.
Without question.
Yeah.
Yep. You're absolutely right. His perspective of going into this big shift into this the big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence with that background, that perspective, the fights that he was fighting with Marathon and Tom Brown and Encana and being on the front lines of the issues we have in the oil and gas industry, and then always having that background of understanding this is all just big data. He's got a physics background, right? He understands the physics. He understands the data. He knows how to QC it, and now this is a guy that knows how to compile it and make some decisions from, truly leveraging the data.
And I think
as a whole.
I think that's what we're all trying to do, right?
Right.
But the main thing is people don't understand how to leverage the data properly.
Right.
Right. It's like we have all this data. How are we actually organizing this data? And how are we plugging it into, whether it is a machine learning algorithm, or how are we looking at the data to interpret it?
Yeah. I think one of the big takeaways for me was that if you do not have a geoscientist that's helping with the interpretations, or maybe we call them biases, that's kind of on the sidelines as you have all this big data, if you don't have that, then all you're doing is pushing through a bunch of data and you're trying to make sense of it all. You can't big data and machine learning and all that stuff can't make an interpretation. That's the point he made.
Yeah.
Well, it'll spit out things for you, but it doesn't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to control those outputs with sound interpretations, good physics, right? And just logic. So you got to have someone that's controlling this stuff.
Yeah.
And like you said, P, in the show, you said it's just a part of the integration. The big data, machine learning, all this buzz is just part of what we do.
Yeah. And using it not, just to kind of continue off what you've been saying, not as the answer, but as just that tool.
Yeah.
Right? To push the science and accelerate it even faster.
Yeah.
As a geoscientist, to help us interpret more.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really cool.
I mean, machine learning by itself, in definition, is a tool that helps to bring all the data together.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not how it's being used.
Right.
And that's the issue. It's being used for the answer, not as a tool.
Yeah. A big difference.
Yeah. But yeah, fun stuff. I think he did a great job explaining artificial intelligence, machine learning, how it breaks down into different segments,
Right.
how he's using it in oil and gas. That was fun.
Yeah, dude. And then completed it with some kind of wild talks and ideas. And
Yeah, and I asked some questions to try to keep up.
Kinda derailed.
And just in my face was just like, ha.
and with that being said, Skip, are we going to go into this thing?
Let's get it on, Mr. Aaron Close. Bam.
To start with the conception, we always have to bring up the conception sponsor of the PBE podcast, and that is TGS. And P-Dog, can you pull up TGS.ai and let's look at their, I think it's this is their RLAS. This is Analytics Ready LAS, subsurface intelligence that you can trust with TGS. And TGS really provides a lot of the data. They got a big spec shoot seismic data set. They provide a lot of data to the overall industry in many different ways. And this is what they've now worked on, and the latest thing that they're pushing along with other things. But this RLAS is where they're taking data and logs that had maybe a triple combo or maybe not even a triple combo, and then they have a machine learning algorithm that's going to take in all the known sonics and actual measured data around that data point that doesn't have a sonic. It's going to run a system and start making synthetics, and it's going to create what is assumed your best synthetic sonic where you don't have one. And then you tie that to maybe a velocity model and seismic and stuff like that, and maybe we can increase resolution of stuff that we didn't have capabilities of doing before. Or maybe we did. Maybe you did as a data scientist.
But the average geo definitely did not.
And you can see it here. This is incredible. So let's go back one page, P, and look at the cross-section you picked. So there's the Permian Basin and the Anadarko Basin. Where do you want to go? You see that one that's kind of through the horseshoe atoll of the Permian? Yeah. You got the Midland Basin. I mean, we can go into any of these. An LAS, standard LAS on the left, and then what they predict and what they create on the right.
Wow, certainly it fills in the gaps, right? That's the big thing that they're doing.
Look at the density or neutron.
So one thing that, as you look at any type of machine learning thing, there's a few quality control things you're looking for, right? So the very first thing you're looking for is basically, are they taking things and they interpolating or are they extrapolating, right? So if you think about just the old days when you'd go out and you'd have an engineer and he'd make a cross plot and he'd draw a line through it, and if that line looked good visually, it probably was good. But then if you went out beyond where the data was into the extrapolation land, things kind of broke down. So that was like the first thing you should always look at is, are we working in interpolation or extrapolation land? Because interpolation with machine learning works brilliantly. Extrapolation, estimating what's never been seen, can really break down quick. In fact, one of the problems with it is when you're extrapolating, is it's much harder to quality control some of these machine learning models in those cases, right? So that's the first thing. And so obviously that's exactly what they're doing, right? You see the slider and you saw, okay, here's the data points you have. Yeah. And then we're basically filling data points in between, right? Right. So so that's a big thing that I look for in terms of, okay, step one, or is it interpolation or extrapolation?
Yeah, that's really good. Step one.
Yeah.
And then, there's a few other steps that you go through, but one of them that I think is actually really important, and it's not so important on this, but a lot of predictive models where you say, this will or won't happen. We'll call it a binary type model.
Yeah.
they'll be trying to predict one thing from another set of variables. And you always want to understand whether or not the prediction's really better than just what's called the base rate, right? So how often does something normally happen? I remember seeing a presentation, a guy showed a beautiful presentation where they were predicting how many patients would actually show up at a doctor's office versus not show up, and because they were trying to not waste money on doctors' time, and figured out which patients wouldn't do it and which ones would.
Okay.
And he presented it like it was this brilliant thing, but fundamentally he would have done a better job just guessing. On average, 95% show up and 5% don't, which was the base rate. Right? So just pulling the base statistic would have done better than this really fancy model, right?
Sheesh.
So as much as we talk about these things, we also have to talk with a bit of caution, right?
Right. Or with, I feel like a bit of concept. We have to we're still smart, right? We're not just letting go and saying, what's the machine telling us? Like you're saying, all right, no, let's just think about the situation, the basic levels, the fundamentals. This could probably work with just some basic assumptions. Let's try that, see what it looks like before we run this big, expensive model for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and, that's the old school method, right? Is the keep it simple, right? And I still believe in that, right?
Yeah.
The simpler the model, the fewer parameters you have to put in, the more reliable you're typically going to be, right?
Yeah.
If you have to put in 5,000 logs to get out one sonic, you're probably messing up. But if you have to put in a triple combo suite, which has things that we know are well related, like density and neutron to sonic, then you start going, okay, that's something I believe.
Right, exactly. That's what they're doing, man. So it's pretty cool. Obviously, TGS has such a massive library of digital LAS that gives them somewhat of certainly an advantage to anybody that doesn't have that data. But say you're a big public company, you buy it all and you do it yourself. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to kind of manipulate the algorithm a little bit and maybe have some different cutoffs. I mean, there's not much difference, I think, as far as what they're presenting and what they're saying they can do.
Well, and if you spend a little time, QC, we would, typical machine learning style, you have a training set and you have a testing set, right? Mm-hmm. So you go look at the data. You say, okay, is it being better represented? Or is it being helpful, right?
So let's go. Let's rock it back, Skip. Say it,
dude. Let's bring it all back. Bring it all the way back.
Aaron Close. How did you become Aaron Close, the data scientist?
Yeah, what's the story, man? How'd you get into, first and foremost, oil and gas and data science? Because you weren't originally a data scientist, correct?
No. So, actually, maybe I was, right? So I actually graduated School of Mines with degrees in math, computer science, and geophysical engineering. And so my first out of college job
was this all at the same time?
It was.
Oh my goodness!
Jeez,
so how was that course load? I just need to know.
I averaged 21 to 23 credits a semester. So it was interesting.
Okay. I did one of those semesters for sure, but not every one of them. Holy smokes, man.
I could taste coffee now. Just from hearing that.
You live on coffee, and what you learn is focus, really. And I learned this about myself during that time. Was I learned that I work better under deadlines and under stress. So if you just say, oh, you have 6 months to get this done, don't worry about it.
Procrastinate.
I will do it the month before. But if you tell me I have a month, I'll be on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned that about myself, and so I actually try and set projects up now for myself where I get external deadlines that force me to be focused.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay, so you jump out of Colorado School of Mines with 3 different degrees, and you do what?
I go to work for Marathon, here in Midland.
Oh, cool. Denise Cox.
Yes.
Dude.
In fact, maybe 3 days into my career with Marathon, Denise walks in with, it must have been a 20-inch stack of papers and is like, here's some read materials on the Permian.
Let's go. Wow.
So, that was my introduction to the Permian. So I'm actually back now. It feels like a reintroduction to the Permian because everything's different, but it's the same.
Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe we can get into that completion segment of the show. Okay, so you start with Marathon. You start diving into the research. Are you on the research and development type?
No, I was just your average working geophysicist, but I always had that kind of bent. And they had a research center in Denver. I thought, man, I'll end up there someday. And then they shut that down, and that's how I ended up eventually at Tom Brown here in Midland.
Okay.
And then they got bought by Encana, and then I went all over the place and ended up in Houston. So
you went with Encana when that happened. Okay.
A year and a day. You can probably guess why.
Man, okay. And you were just doing frontlines geophysics,
By that time, I was kind of. This is how my career morphed. I started as a geophysicist, and then I became a geoscientist. Actually, Dave Thomas, the guy who owns Trey, was my mentor at Tom Brown. He's like, no, we only hire geoscientists, not geophysicists. You're gonna have to learn this stuff. Like, man, I don't know about that.
Heard that before.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys probably know that story.
Dude,
Oh, yeah.
that's freaking
Oh, yeah.
awesome, man. You were with him in his prime.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I transitioned to being a geoscientist, and then really have done things all across the spectrum since then.
Okay. That's a really, really interesting perspective of the industry, certainly. As we're coming to understand the rocks a little bit more, and certainly understanding the tools that are measuring these rocks a little bit more, and we're all diving down these rabbit holes as we're trying to find space in the subsurface that's filled with mostly oil instead of anything else, right? That's
Mostly oil.
essentially what we do. But it's very, very complex, man. And there's so much to every little piece of being a geoscientist. Every kind of column that builds that label as a geoscientist, petrology, right? Petrophysics, geophysics, geochemistry. You got to have a little bit of all of that to be a geoscientist, and that's a fascinating perspective. And then when did you kind of really make the turn into manipulating a ton of data?
Or when was that, that the realization of how important, organizing your data?
So, there's a whole long story to that. But fundamentally, I already started with this math and computer science degree. And so I had this bent towards doing all that stuff. So I would make little tools that would, do whatever. And I started doing them in Excel, and then worked up and did stuff in Access, and then MATLAB.
Sheesh.
And now I'm a Python and SQL guy.
There you go.
And all that kind of stuff. But what you learn through that process is 80% of geoscientists and engineers in our business aren't geoscientists and engineers. They're data monkeys.
Wow.
We manipulate data all the time. That's all we do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And I was actually successful in my career, not because I was a great geoscientist or an engineer, was because I was really good at the data side. And I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, okay, well, I'm good at manipulating this data and doing it. But I could iterate on ideas and concepts quicker because I was good on that side. Right?
Yeah, you knew how to quickly manipulate small manipulations to concepts that would make more sense geologically or whatever's driving.
Well, or being able to just aggregate huge amounts of data, right?
Sure.
And test it. And, different companies have different styles. That's one thing you learn as you kind of jump around. And one thing I learned is some companies are kind of statistically driven, and some are kind of physics driven. They really think things through. In fact, I got to watch XTO and Exxon kind of merge. The great thing about seeing that merge was you had two companies with very, very different perspectives, one on the data side and one on the physics side, and they tried to make this thing work. And it took a long time, but they did a good job of keeping them separate for a long time to allow that merge to happen more naturally. But yeah, if there was ever two companies that were on different sides of that, it was those two.
Sheesh. So that's kind of where you saw kind of this peak in your interest of what's going on? How could you possibly merge two sides of the spectrum and all that data and that way of thinking and all that? I mean, sounds like such a task.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but fundamentally, for a long time, I've said, I believe data. And that was absolutely kind of my truth for a long time, right? Is you can't convince me anything without some data. Mm-hmm. But what I guess I've come to now is some people have gone so far down the data side, and they're not thinking about what's driving it, what causes it.
That's right.
And it's that causal stuff. What's the cause? What's the physics behind it? And if you can link those two things together, that's where the power really is, right? Is understanding the data, but also understanding the physics that's driving it, right?
Right. Which is, I think, we're the furthest away from understanding the physics of what's driving this freaking thing.
Yeah.
So we got a great future ahead of us. And I think that was a fantastic way to end the conception part of the show. Just kind of an overall background and really get a vibe from Aaron Close and the experience and everything you've seen. I mean, you've obviously proven your salt, I guess, or whatever they say with that. Okay, so let's go down, and now let's drill down into the PBE podcast with Aaron Close. Before we drill down, we're going to just give a quick shout out for our drill down segment sponsor. So now we're just going to dive right back in, and we're going to do this segment. It's called the Drill Down segment. And what we're going to do today, Aaron, is something we've never done before. And P-Dog, I hope you can put your headset on at this point, because you're going to be super active in this part of the segment. Because basically what you're going to do is watch 3 young professionals kind of Google our way through the general concept of big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence.
I wish you would have said 4, because I'm in the room and I'm not that old.
I meant no disrespect. Less experience than you. We're going to bring it up. We're basically going to Google this thing. Just control our rabbit holes when we ask a question and you say, you know what, that's going to go down 10 minutes of something that's way more detail than we need to.
Yeah,
Dude,
that's
I'm
just
a
totally
nerd.
unnecessary.
That's not a bad thing to me.
Hey, if we had all the time in the world, we'd do it. Maybe episode 2 with Aaron Close could definitely be that. But right now, let's just pull up a general image and just the idea of fundamentally at a large scale, what are we talking about when someone says machine learning, big data?
Well, I know we've had this conversation off the air, but something that most people don't understand is how machine learning is actually divided up, and something that might be sold as machine learning isn't machine learning at all.
Yeah, so you can think of it in quite different ways. There's a chunk that's old school statistics, right? This is the fitting polynomials to functions and that kind of stuff, and very useful. In fact, the work that was done in that domain was pretty amazing. And then you have this modern machine learning, and a lot of those are built around neural nets, deep neural nets, convolutional neural nets, and you hear a lot of buzzwords around those. And then you've also got some other things that are support vector machines and a couple other things that really are specialized little tools. But what you find is there's this whole suite of things, and it's growing every day. Like if you tell someone, hey, I'm a data scientist, and I know everything about data science, they're lying, because it just changes so fast, and they're making so much progress. That said, knowing the right tools to apply is one of the pieces, right? And so one of those things that's often misconstrued as data or as machine learning is an optimization problem, right? So optimization is really not necessarily machine learning. Machine learning is where you're trying to get the machine to predict some value, not to necessarily optimize process. But there's different categories.
Oh, interesting.
And good machine learning, or a good data scientist, I'll use that broader term, which is a fairly new term. Really, those guys, they should know which types of approaches are going to work for what kinds of problems, right? And applying the right approaches to the right problems is the first real step to being successful.
Okay, so let's take a step back. And I think, P-Dog, you're the one who said this. You got to start with data. So you have everything that has to do with drilling a well, completing a well, and bringing on production, right? Everybody that's listening is like, okay, they got a little bit of everything, or maybe somebody like you knows every little piece that goes into that. Drilling, the tool bit, the rate of penetration, torque on bit, all that individual data for that piece, plus the completion, plus the production, all that data.
Plus all the, got core, sidewall plugs, all the geochem data, whatever have you, right?
So you got all that. And then we have something that can take it. So you have a database that can just take in those zeros and ones. And then you have machine learning and then AI. Is that kind of the workflow? And I think P-Dog was the one who kind of broke that down for us.
It is. Yeah, so definitely organizing and cleaning is the big step, right?
Yeah.
In fact, everybody likes to show off the fancy tools and all these little things that they've got.
But that data needs to be QC'd
the
well
cleaning,
before.
organizing stuff is still the big step.
Yeah.
It's still 80% of the work, right? I said earlier that geoscientists and engineers are really data scientists. Well, that's because you're already doing that big painful part a lot of times. And we've gotten better, but I'll just tell you, it's nowhere near where it needs to be to really maximize the value of the data there, and being able to pull things together in meaningful ways too.
Okay, so what's this image that you got, P-Dog?
It's essentially dividing machine learning into supervised and unsupervised, and then you branch off into different algorithms from those.
Yeah, so those are two of the main branches, and you don't have any of the optimization stuff in this graph that you're looking at, but you do have those two main branches. And supervised, you can think of that as like, okay, I have a well log, I'm trying to predict the facies that my petrophysicist saw when he looked at the cuttings, and I want to use the well logs to do that. Unsupervised is saying I just want to cluster or organize them in some pattern, right? And then you also have, beyond that, you have things like regressions, where it's a type of supervised learning where you're trying to predict one variable from the other. So predicting the sonic log from all the other log suites, like TGS is doing, that's classic supervised learning, right?
Got it. Okay, so before this, and maybe this was the optimization process that you mentioned, maybe it's not, but you got to have a database, a relational database that understands what the data is and where it's coming from, what part of the process it's coming from, right? I mean, if you're talking ROP, or weight on bit from drilling, and it has some correlation to your production, those are coming from two different tabs or two different columns or two different, right? The relational database on the back end of kind of where it all sits and how it relates to each other is really important in all this, right?
Yeah, and you use the word relational database. That's one of many types of databases, right? It's kind of the classic database style, and they're used very broadly. So yeah, being able to tie the data together as a data scientist is a key piece, and organize it, and like, should I be averaging or summing these variables to consolidate it to use against something that's sampled at different sample rate or in different space and a different domain. Doing domain transforms. There's there could be 4 hours of talk about how to do data normalization and cleaning and organization.
Okay. So let's assume we got those two.
I'm not going to torture you guys with
we've QC'd. Let's assume we've QC'd it.
Okay.
All right. That's not the sexy part. That's not what everybody's selling. That's not what anybody's talking about.
No, but that's what gets success.
That's right. That's what all the true scientists want to see, that and want to know exactly how that's QC'd. Everybody else just wants to sell a product. Then the next start, let's assume that we have a fantastic relational database that's super easy and savvy to pull out and find and apply some kind of supervised, unsupervised machine learning techniques to it. And then ultimately we're going to get to artificial intelligence, which is the idea of that a thing is going to look at that and say, oh, here's the correlation and causation of the problem.
Yeah, and so that line between what's machine learning and artificial intelligence is a little vague, right?
Okay.
So machine learning is really the classic set of things that where you say actually predict a value or something like that. Artificial intelligence is trying to go a step past that. They're trying to say, here's all the things you can see and predict, but from all this pattern of data, we're learning something, and that learning is inherently in the machine. Like you put in a set of, the classic one is image analysis, right? You put in a billion pictures into Google's image engine, they train against it for 4 months, and now you have some kind of convolutional neural net. I can put any picture in, and it'll say, that's a cup, and that's a bottle of Tito's, and these guys
that's
are
a dog,
Yahoos,
that's
whatever.
a cat, yeah.
Right, but it learns something about it. And that's really, that true learning and understanding is very much in its infancy, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk, and we mentioned Musk earlier. Today.
Yeah.
There's this concern about the machines getting to this point called
we're getting musky. We're getting musky.
I think it's called the singularity, right? Where all of a sudden the machines are smarter than humans, and they'll learn and they can teach themselves faster than humans. We're not even close to that, right?
Yeah.
That said, there's some really crazy stuff going on that might get there really quick.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's save that for some of the completion. Let's talk about. Let's zoom back out and think about this whole process again. We got QC data. We have a relational database that we can apply some machine learning to it, and we have this AI thing that's kind of in its infancy to help. Maybe is the way that we could say that right now. Where does neural net come in?
So a neural net's a specific type of analysis in the machine learning world, right?
Okay.
And so basically what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to take some set of inputs, we're going to process it through some set of intermediate, what they call nodes or layers.
Do you have an actual, like a real life basic example of what?
Yeah, he's got one right there, right? So, but neural networks aren't new. How they're being used is new,
okay.
Right? So if you look at what was done, 15 years ago, well, before this big change, neural networks were 2 or 3 layers, and you were really trying to do something like just simply predict one log from another. It was very simplistic. Now they're doing much more complex things where they're putting in a picture, and in each one of those input nodes is some derived property of that picture. Like they may have 1,000 points across that picture where they've sampled, is there a line here, and what's the angle of the line, and what's the color within this block, and then those feed into a second layer there that's kind of making a larger scale amalgamation of features. And then what they're trying to do is take this set of very tiny features that may be very broad, like thousands of features is what they create, and scale that into some meaning at the end. Dog, cat, frac truck, whatever it is, right? And that involves a lot of layers and a lot of input to do that. And that's really why the scale of what's being done at some of these computational data centers is just unbelievable.
What do you mean? Do you have an example of that? That sounds really intense.
So, like convolutional neural nets is probably the biggest one where they're really driving that process. But and that's mostly around image analysis. But that's just an abstraction. Natural language analysis is the same side. They're in natural language analysis. They might take words, and those words will be abstracted in some type of meta meaning, meaning the computer understands it's a meaning and may actually understand that synonyms have similar meaning, right? So that's a node. And then they map the patterns within those words to a broader node of meanings, right? So you extrapolate these out, and the patterns between them start to make sense. In fact, one thing that they were able to show that the basic tools of machine learning can now write an article that 70% of humans cannot distinguish from being written by a real human.
One more time. Play that back. I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
So they can build an article with a machine learning algorithm that's been trained on real articles written by real people.
Yep.
And 70% of real humans cannot distinguish that from one written by a human.
Wow.
It's kind of like that video that came out before with Joe Rogan, where they clipped similar videos imitating his voice.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of sounded like him, like his actual
just
video.
Like him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying that you're just reading text. You're just Googling something and you're like, oh, I need to find out about like how flies exist. And all of a sudden you're reading something that's totally bullshit. And you have no way to, what do you have to do? You got to go down to
how does that differ from like regular media today?
Right. That's exactly what I'm getting at.
It doesn't. Let me tell you.
That's what I mean. It's
what I'm getting at.
I think it was Microsoft did this really interesting experiment where they created an AI bot that was just a chat bot people could talk to, but trained it on a big, huge set of data, and then dynamically trained it against what people were talking to it. Well, it apparently became an asshole.
Yeah, that's when you put anything and you allow the internet to be like do whatever. I think I know what you're talking about. It was either in China or Japan, right? Or
I don't remember where it was, but you can go Google this.
Yeah,
and
Google chatbot. But
all right, while you're Googling chatbot, and we might check this out. Okay, so we're at this machine learning stage, and you have neural nets, and you have these different ways to mess with the data and find things. Even at like a basic example, I was immediately thinking, we have no idea what the hell's going on. The reason machine learning even exists, after listening to you talk about it, is because we don't know what's going on. And now it's cutting the data in all these weird ways. The data is already weird in itself. A gamma ray reading a formation is already kind of weird, and you can find all kinds of weird anomalies in a gamma ray in a carbonate reservoir in itself. Yeah. A stylolite could look like a shale. It's a freaking stylolite. It's not a shale at all. Yeah. But the gamma ray totally read it as this crazy uranium spike. Maybe if you have a spectral, you can break that out. But if you don't have spectral, it's just a high spike in gamma ray. Like, is that the Monique shale? What is that? I don't know. You have all these anomalies in the data itself, and now you're telling me we're going to apply something to that already has all these anomalies in it, and it's going to cut it in all these different ways to try to find some other weird anomaly inside of it. It's an anomaly in itself.
It is. And the problem is, it's really hard to QC those things, right? And that's why you have to bring things back to the physics side. This is where, in fact, the book written by the guy who predicted the Astros winning the World Series, like he did that like 5-7 years ahead of time. And he did it because he went into the organization. He wrote a great book about it. And looked at what they were doing, and he saw that they were merging this data science that really, like Moneyball and what was done at the
Oakland A's,
and then some of the stuff that was done at the Cardinals. You know, the Astros had taken that kind of to the next level, and they'd integrated not just the machine learning part, but the human part. right? And they were integrating what the scouts were saying, and so they were really melding these two things. And he said, man, that's really powerful. And he predicted this outcome that no one would have believed. This team at the bottom, the absolute bottom of the...
Ronco believed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ronco believed.
Every year Ronco believes.
What were you gonna say real quick? Skip on that.
Well, I was gonna say, I feel like the main issue with oil and gas is what is that final output that a large amount of those machine algorithms are running into, right? It's production, right? Production is the end all be all, right? So this well does good, this well does bad, right? So these sets of values going into this well means this well did bad. These sets of values going to this well means this well did good, right? And there's so much more to that than that, right? We know it's how did we complete this? How did we, how did we pick our landing zone?
But if you put all that in, theoretically, it should predict well.
Yeah.
But again, you talk about big data. We're talking millions of records, and some of these are billions, right? And we oftentimes don't have that. So in data science, they talk about something being tall and thin versus wide. Mm-hmm. And that means basically the number of parameters you have versus what you're trying to predict, right? And we kind of have a saying, everything gets wide, right? Meaning if you've got 50 parameters and you've only got 50 sample points, right, it's really hard to go, okay, that's enough to really know which ones are driving this, right? Mm-hmm. You can get some inference into it, but as you get more and more parameters and less results, that becomes much, much more vague, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the big struggles. And something like the Permian, where like a data point is $7 million, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to go out and get a billion data points like they can pull images from Google and train them.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and that kind of brings up another concern. Is we have to integrate. If everybody's spending $7 million or $10 million for a horizontal well themselves, and they have like 100 of them, which seems like a lot of data, but there's actually 20,000 of them in the basin, and we actually need those 20,000 to kind of like, hey guys, this is maybe what's really going on here.
Well, and this is where I really believe the tying the data science and the physics together. Like, if you go, look, I see no reason why the height of the guy who was doing the directional drilling matters, and I can throw that variable out. Right? Yeah. Like, how tall the guy was doesn't matter to production. Now, maybe oil in place does. I'll keep that, right? So this is where logic and understanding of the system really comes in. You can't just throw all the data in the world in. And if you bring in the right data and you've cleaned it the right way and limit it to the things that, from a physics point of view, are the most likely drivers, right? You don't, there's a saying in the modeling business, all models are wrong, some are useful, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if you have that understanding that, like, you're trying to make a useful model, that means things that are probably going to drive it should probably be included. Things that are highly unlikely to drive it probably produce noise in the system. You should really question whether or not that needs to be included.
So, in your opinion, how, because for me, I'm not going to be the one writing the code, but I could be the one that's sitting there saying that's useful and that's not useful.
Yeah. So
do you think that is still an issue at a lot of these companies, is they don't have that bias sitting next to the guy who's putting all of this together?
So absolutely. The integration between the technical professional, the subject matter expert, and those data scientists is critical. Like, the original idea when I think Google was the first company that described what a data scientist was a person who's a scientist first and uses data to do that, right?
Yeah.
And we often now talk about data scientists as if they're this magic person in a black box by themselves just spitting out awesome stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're spit robots. Out stuff.
They're like, oh, should we check in? Robots. Should we see if he's still alive in there?
Yeah. but integration, just like it's always been across disciplines, is what's going to drive value, right? Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I call them aliens or robots.
Yeah, that's what you look when you look at my office. That's what you think, right?
Yeah,
every time.
That's right.
Every time.
you hit the nail on the head. Like, that dude's definitely a robot.
There's no way. You're just looking at, just kind of like peeking and looking at your screen. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on there.
Okay, so let's get across the hump of machine learning, and let's get to the end of the drill down segment, which is, can you fundamentally break down why and what AI is really going to do, assuming we can get to that level that everybody thinks we're close to?
really, if we're looking at things that we wanted to do with AI, to me that ends up in a category I call reinforcement learning, meaning what I want an AI to do is make my life better. Mm-hmm. If that means figuring out when they can let the people be out here building roads or not, if the machine's helping them predict what time to put construction crews out, or what time to turn my air conditioner on at home. Nest, you've done a great job with that.
But not my Nest, man. I'm going to need you to come over to the house and show me those tricks, because my Nest is an idiot.
Your Nest is,
you may need a hard reset.
It was
Oh yeah, maybe.
it kind of fell out of the tree a little early. You know what I mean?
But to me, a lot of them are just going to be things that make your life easier, right? The big one a lot of companies are looking at are the driving side, right? Can we make a machine that can drive around as well as a person?
Yeah.
Can we then get rid of the need for people to own their own cars? Can we?
In the Permian, I bet that's not a very hard task.
Right.
But, in a suburban area, then that's where things get questionable.
I mean, if you think about it, if the computer, all they have to do is outperform humans when it comes to like running red lights and causing accidents, I feel like that's pretty a tangible goal.
Yeah.
Like Musk is onto something that might be able to do that.
That's the whole thing with like the trucking industry, right? Is switching over to, just total automation, because hey, trucks can run 24 hours a day now. Now because you have all these rules and regs against truck drivers, driving over.
Yeah.
Because we know firsthand here, what happens when you have a guy in a water truck going for 30 something plus hours.
Exactly.
It doesn't end well.
Right. Exactly. Right.
No, and those things are very powerful. It's funny because a lot of people are very afraid of like AI is going to take all our jobs, it's going to improve manufacturing. Like it's changing jobs, but will it take them? I don't know. Like a lot of the truckers, for instance, most of their work is not driving. I mean, that's physically when they're doing it, but it's getting things loaded, unloading, interacting with customers while you're in. You're still going to need that. You can't just send a random truck out and just take care of that stuff. It's not going to load itself.
That might be pretty sweet. You just sleep all day in the rig, and then you show up and you do your thing, and then you hop back in the rig, you pass back out. That might be a sweet deal.
I don't mind AI taking over as long as I get a stipend to live. Like,
I mean, there's always going to be jobs available, right? It's just going to be a matter of are you going to be able to evolve into one of those new areas of like where you need expertise, right?
And the idea that we're barely out of the jungle in reality, right? We barely really understand the physical world. So as far as machines outsmarting us, well, they're going to outsmart us with what they know, which is what currently we know, and all the projections we currently have based on everything we know up to this point as we're speaking. Now, tomorrow, something can be invented or something can be found that fundamentally changes our idea of physics and answers some fundamental questions a little deeper, and all of a sudden that machine's totally wrong.
It is, but the thing that I think we've talked about the current technology, but the things that are coming down the pike will blow your mind. Some of the quantum computing stuff.
Where's Anthony?
Where's Anthony? Hop in here, dog.
So our studio engineer's definitely chiming in on this one.
Quantum computing is powerful, but what makes it really powerful is what they found is they're growing their power to a second power, meaning like if you think of exponential growth as being fairly constant, like Moore's law, you double the number of transistors every couple of years, right? What they've found with the rate of growth of quantum computing is that their ability to do computations is going up by a power of a power.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like 2 to the 2 to the 2, right? And so it's
it's insane.
It's super fast growth, and that means what we think of as like way out in the future could hit us like a ton of bricks really quick.
Peter, pull up a quantum computer real quick.
Yeah.
It's going to blow your mind. It looks just like a chandelier.
Oh yeah, we Googled it on the way back from ERTech.
Yeah, Anthony just kind of blew my mind.
There it
that
is.
one right there.
What is that?
How insane is that? Is that the one in Australia? I think that's the Australian one.
But they're already at the point where Google cannot keep up. They've got a team internally that is trying to reproduce what they can do with quantum computer with their own computers. And at first it was like, we can do it in 15 seconds with the quantum computer. Now it's like the basic computation would take 2 years. with a giant cloud, right? So it's growing so quick, and pretty soon they won't be able to check. Like originally it was can we check what the quantum computers
that was their QC. It was like, all right, let's plug it in. Let's see what we can do here. Now it's like,
so effectively they can't check quantum computers anymore, right? The ability to have enough computational power in a regular computer has gone away.
What does that even mean?
My head kind of hurts. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, let's bring it into oil and gas. Let's bring AI into oil and gas. What, in your opinion, is it going to be? Where's AI going to actually make the biggest improvements? And we can keep it general as far as like drilling efficiency, keeping completion costs down, regulatory. I mean,
yeah. So to me, drilling efficiency is a key one. Completion efficiency too. One of the problems with completion efficiency is it still requires a lot of logistical support, getting sand, water, and everything there and organized. And they've made amazing strides in optimizing that. Drilling, it's getting better. But you think about all the little tiny decisions that people are making on every strand of pipe that goes in the hole. They're making that based on their experience, which is great, but that's what AI does. It bases it on experience. And once you can start taking the experience of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of wells and putting that into a machine, opposed
to one guy who maybe he's worked his whole life, but it's only been 1,000 wells that he's ever drilled, which is still insane to think about, but compared to 10,000, 100,000 wells.
Exactly, and also in terms of response time, right? So that guy on the rig, he can do it, and he's responding. Every time you get a survey or when he's seeing the stuff come back. He's stopping, making a decision, telling people what to do. Once you have that fully integrated system, you don't need that anymore, right? Now it's the machine saying, okay, this is happened. We're doing this adjustment. It's smooth, integrated, and just works, right? The other thing that really does is it can move people a little further from the physical floor of the machine and improve safety. And I think that's a huge thing that you'll see too.
Yeah, really cool. Okay, so let's end the drill down segment with, have you heard this rumor going around that there's a drilling rig right now, like 45 minutes away from this town, that is being manned by computers, and it's drilling down as deep as it can? They're trying to figure out how...
It's a fully automated drill rig.
Yeah. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard this, but I'm not shocked.
Yeah,
I know there's been work on fully automated systems for a while.
Yeah, supposedly it's out there, man, drilling away. And there's just a couple of computer guys just keeping things cooled and
just chilling in the what's it called? Oh, it's not good. Everyone who's been in the field is gonna hate
the doghouse.
Yeah,
they're definitely not in the doghouse.
You don't think they're in the doghouse?
No, dude. These are IT guys that are like keeping the generators all cool. They're like
in the penthouse.
That's how I visualize it. They're always sitting on the
they're out there throwing chains? Come on.
Hell no. Hell no. They probably have 6 H2S sensors on, freaking out.
You want to go out there and fix it? And he's like, I don't even know what it is out there.
Well, and that's one of the other things is if you look at places where AI's doing interesting stuff, some of the service industry, plumbing, electrical, maintenance type stuff, those are very unreachable things, right? Because then you're not only like fixing something that's already working, you're trying to diagnose something that who knows what happened out there before.
Right, how it was even built. Yeah,
and so that's a whole different level of thing.
Wow. Well, for the drill down segment, I think that was awesome.
I think that was legit.
That was legit, that was awesome, legit. Aaron. We're going to close the drill down segment. We're going to go into the completion segment. And to complete, we must thank our sponsor of the completion segment. Let's go into the IFF just for a minute.
Sure. Yeah, it's an organization for nonprofit for combat veterans. We're trying to focus right now just on local Permian guys. We're trying to do Will Cannon, the guy that I found this with, was in the Army, and we'd both done a lot of nonprofit work with the majors like Wounded Warrior and Phoenix Patriot and other organizations like that. And we had an idea to do something different to try to impact people in a different way, where we isolate guys in a local area. That way, whatever the trips are, if it's kayaking, hiking, or anything, we completely outfit those guys so they get all the gear they need to recreate that experience whenever they want to. And they don't have to rely on the centralized, oversight committee to call them up when they have like a free spot or something.
How do you find these guys? How do they get a part of this?
That's been the challenge, especially moving out here, since neither Will or myself is from the Permian Basin. We both ended up here, and we love it here. So we wanted to start here and this be our flagship. It's really word of mouth. The guys you know, you'd be surprised how small the community is once you start talking. It's just like the oil and gas. But that's our thing now. You know, our donations are getting so big. We've got huge sponsors like Yeti, Vibe Kayaks, Ultima Boots, Devil's River Whiskey. So we're starting to get the funding we need to we have more money than veterans now, which is a beautiful thing. Because for the first couple of years we were doing this, it was just fighting for scraps. And honestly, lately it's just exploded, and we can't be more proud, man. I mean, every one of us gets beat the hell up. You got bruises, rock rash. I mean, that's the point, man, because you got to rely on each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and just the teamwork it takes to get through. You kind of get that back in that mindset of when you're in. So when you get back, it's not like some guy you met, you shook hands with in a photo. It's like, shit, I remember I busted my ass on that rock and you grabbed my paddle, so it ended up floating down the river or whatever.
Right.
So that way when they call up on a Tuesday, Wednesday, they're not strangers or a name on a piece of paper. Like, these guys know each other.
Yeah.
And the testimonials we've got are amazing.
Let's dive into the completion segment of the PBE podcast with Aaron Close. And there's a lot to complete. There's certainly a lot to complete. But, P-Dog, what do we got?
Oh my God! Can you run? There is a lot to complete. There are things.
Can we pull up? A completion photo? What do we got for a completion photo? Give me like a robot. Give me. What's Musk doing in space right now? Because that's the completion of where we are today of this modern
Musk in space. I don't think that's okay. Well,
Musk in space. Here we go.
That's him.
That's they actually sent Elon Musk into space.
I feel like I should give the SEC disclaimer. I'm short on Tesla. Just so they know.
We are not sponsored by Tesla.
So what's going on with this spaceship exactly? Is this thing's it's orbiting or it's gone? It's out of orbit.
They fired it into space
I
on
think-
like one of their rockets, right?
Yeah, I think it's on its way to Sun. It's orbiting.
Yeah,
Sun.
it's heading out. It's not in
it's-
orbit.
yeah.
It's beyond orbit, I believe.
Wow. And does it have like a golden record of Elvis Presley and like the stuff we did in the 70s or no?
No.
So if it contacts life, it'll let us know.
I'm sure there are definitely some conspiracy theories about what's up there, though.
Oh, I bet. Dude, Musk has he's got full control of this, dude. Can you imagine? He's like, we got images back from the sun. It's not even hot. It's like cold. And Musk has like this, I don't know. Anyway, where I'm going with this is when we were talking about
When we were talking about physics.
Yeah, when
we weren't paying attention.
When we were talking about physics and quantum computing, I was thinking.
I'm sorry. Can you believe the sun is cold? It's actually a vacuum.
Dude.
It's sucking in all the heat. So the heat's not coming from the sun, but it's coming from out of the solar system.
Oh, yeah, dude. It's like some weird.
Dude, we'll bring Eddie Bravo.
Did we just figure it out?
We figured it out.
I'm digging it. What if he comes back and says the Earth is flat? Musk can do that now. He has something in space.
The fact he
that's
hasn't
not controlled by
makes me believe
NASA.
it's not.
It's not controlled by NASA. It's not controlled by government. It's controlled by some dude called Elon Musk.
Do we need to start this segment over again?
The sun is
sun
green.
is green.
The sun is
I
green.
can back you up on
no,
that.
No, no, that is true. That is
The
true.
sun is actually green.
Okay. We spun off a little bit in the beginning of this, but it's good entertainment. All right, I don't know. That was just while we were looking at quantum computing. All right, so for the completion segment, Aaron Close, what are you working on today? What are you doing with big data? Where do you see the future of big data, and how are we taking advantage of this stuff today?
Yeah, so my day job is I'm working with a great guy over at Well Log Data. We're trying to build, I'll call it a data nexus, right? The whole idea there is, I actually believe that 90% of the time you don't have to do any of these fancy models. You can just look at the data and you can get your answer, right? But if we're really spending this 80% of our time organizing, finding, cleaning stuff, that's a huge inefficiency. So our real vision is just shorten that time between I have an idea to I checked it out, I saw some data. The data was enough to either tell me I need to dig deeper or I need to throw it away, right? And just shorten that time frame. That's kind of how we see this company. And we're doing some neat stuff with a group called OSDU, which is Open Subsurface Data Universe. It's a consortium of a lot of companies that are really trying to get their arms around this. How do we organize all this data and put it in a store where every one of these applications can touch it and see it, but it can still only exist in one place, right? So you don't have a bunch of duplication and versioning issues and all the weird things that happen. And those are really neat things. I'm glad to be parts of both of those. And then, like, from this really broad sense, I just, come talk to me about data. Like, I'm starting a meetup here in town called PADS, Permian Analytics and Data Science.
Nice.
Yeah, and I just wanted to get together all the people that are here doing data stuff, I don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to start meeting here this fall.
Cool.
But really looking forward to just having all these smart people in one room and start talking about how we can make things more efficient.
That sounds awesome. We should probably sponsor that. Have it here. Not in this room, but in the big room.
In the big room, yeah.
That could be really cool. And we could just kind of fire off just other interesting Aaron Close type people and other robots.
Not sure I'm glad I'm called a robot now.
All right, P-Dog, come on, man. You sat there this whole time.
Oh, shit.
Big data, man.
Well, I was going to bring up this article that
Yes.
I read earlier on how machine learning is actually causing a science crisis.
Yeah.
So people listening can find this on bbc.com, but essentially it's saying machine learning is not the silver bullet. You still need geoscientists to help the machine predict the final model and the solutions you're trying to predict.
That really scares me too. This idea that we can just throw it in and get something out. And there's some really great groups out there that are trying to go that next step and really merge the two. And that's where I think the future of what you'll see is recognizing data science is a piece. It's not a magic bullet. It's a piece of a bigger puzzle that includes all the traditional sciences, but we now have another set of tools to go a little deeper and do some new things, but it's just a piece.
So instead of looking at it to find the answer, more or less using, big data, machine learning in order to progress the science at a much faster rate.
I hope so. I hope we don't just turn our brains off and shove things in computers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So is machine learning the answer, or is just part of an integrated workflow?
Oh, absolutely just part of the integrated workflow. In fact, I will guarantee if you want to make a big money mistake, you shove something into a machine learning model and don't put any thought behind it. Just let the machine tell you what to do. I guarantee you'll spend a lot of money and screw something up.
Sheesh.
Ooh.
I believe it.
So this is something where I was in my infancy of when I took this like 1 week like machine learning short course, learned almost nothing, but what the basis was, it was on Kaggle, right? And they were talking about like random forests and all these other kinds of different machine learning algorithms. Can you kind of, in your perspective, break down, what those subsets of machine learning are, or is that
that's really a whole show.
Or is that a whole show? Yeah,
I will say, like, for instance, random forest is a great example. What we're learning to do is make machine learning more stable, and random forest is a great example of that, because random forest is a decision tree, but it's a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
That's really all it is. So instead of just taking all the data, putting it into one decision tree, and getting a prediction, you're putting a subset in, and then another subset, and you're producing a random forest of these subsets. And then what that does is it provides some statistical stability of the predictions later. So now I put some.
So now instead of just going into one machine, we're going into multiple, and we're still.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd call it a machine. It's a model.
Model.
Right?
Okay.
Right. So it's just more complex models, and there's I can't remember what they're called, but there's a couple different aggregation processes like that. One's called bagging, and I think random forest is an example of that. So yeah, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take existing models and make them more stable, a little bit better. Some of the deep learning stuff's doing some of those things, right? By taking the data you have and building a better statistical model that's less prone to noise.
So in your opinion right now, with everything that you looked at and everything you got going on, what's the biggest issue with the oil and gas industry right now as far as our ability to make money with every new well we drill?
Wow. Wow. I think being honest with ourselves. Like being honest with ourselves about, like, we space those things too close together. We need to stop. being honest with ourselves that like, hey, we thought we were going to have a B factor of 1, and we have a B factor of 0.2. And I just see it a lot. You're out there spending a lot of money, big operational groups. And
What's the B factor for those who are
Controls the decline curve.
Yeah, so in classic decline analysis, you're fitting it to an equation, machine learning.
Yep.
Right? But that equation is something that's generalized by ARPS, right? ARPS did it, I think, in the 40s. And he said there's 3 main types of fits. There's an exponential, a harmonic, and a hyperbolic. And actually, those are actually just 3 cases of the same one and with different B factors. So an exponential is a B factor of 0. I think a harmonic is a B factor of exactly 1, and a hyperbolic is some other random B factor. And there's arguments about what represents physics better or worse. But fundamentally, what you're saying as you have a higher B factor means that the rate of decline of the well decreases through time, right? And so that was very obvious in early unconventional wells that like you had initial high decline and it would flatten out and go for a very long time. In fact, the earliest wells in the U.S. were actually unconventional. Most people don't know that. The first shale gas well was drilled up in, I think, Dunkirk, New York.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So it was in the Dunkirk shale, I guess.
Yeah.
But so in like 1821, like really early, before Drake and all that, right? So we've been doing shale gas for a while. So don't pretend like this is anything. But what they saw is like some of those old wells in like the Huron areas and some of those, they're producing gas 100 years later, and so they definitely had that flattening out effect, right?
Different set of circumstances with, newer methods for sure. And I think that's what we're starting to learn.
No, methods are one thing. Physics is another. Right?
Okay.
So don't assume because the method's different, the physics changes, right?
Yeah.
Right? So when we started doing big fracks at the beginning of the shale revolution, all the models before that said, oh, we're going to model this as if it's the permeability flowing in laterally into a well in radial flow, right? But that assumed that you couldn't frack beyond what you could flow naturally. Right, and so fracking changed that mindset. Okay, now we can frack out and access rock we would never have touched before. So physics doesn't change. Maybe our models do. When I said, all models are wrong, some are useful, the assumptions in those models will drive where they're useful, right?
Yeah, some really, really good stuff. Really, really good stuff, Aaron. Okay, I think this is how we'll end it. We've had this Galton board on this table for the past 4 shows. And the only reason we have this here is because it was a gift, and also because we knew you were coming on the show. And right. Sir Isaac Galton, right? It's called the Galton board, as he was like the kind of fundamental guy about binomial distribution or whatever. And what was cool about the box is said life is just a bunch. Life is basically a bunch of probabilities.
Yeah.
Right.
No, and this is beautiful, right? So you turn it over. I don't know if you guys have seen this. You should do this.
Does it every time.
Produces a perfect normal distribution. Actually, it is a binomial distribution, I believe, or binomial Gaussian. I can't remember. But because they're individual samples, it's not a continuous distribution. But that said, it reflects roughly a normal distribution. But it happens every time, right? You flip it over, they go back. You flip it back again. And they've even got the little line on there because they know what it's going to do, right? And it's just all those random things ended up being some type of pattern, and that's nature. Nature is random events that create patterns.
Wow, I love the way that ended. Do not disconnect yourself from nature. Wow. Aaron Close, it was an absolute honor to be behind these microphones with you, Skips, and P-Dog.
I'm going to go and Google 90% of the things you guys talked about. But
yes, 100%. With that being said, Skips,
we out.